America's heroes who fought in our wars outside sweating their asses off with oxygen, battling all kinds of ailments, while these sit in the air conditioning, walled off from any of it. I don't even know what to say. I've been coming down here 10, 15 years. I'm used to the hypocrisy. Christina Keene will tell you from VFW. She sat in an office with Mitch McConnell and a war veteran from Kentucky, and he looked that man in the eyes and he said, we'll get it done. And he lied to him. Because Mitch McConnell yesterday flipped. I'm used to the lies. I'm used to the hypocrisy. Senator Pat Toomey won't take a meeting with the veterans groups. Sends out his chief of staff. I'm used to the cowardice. I've been here a long time. Senate's where accountability goes to die. These people don't care. They're never losing their jobs. They're never losing their health care. I'm used to all of it, but I am not used to the cruelty. You think their struggles end because the PACT Act passes? All it means is they don't have to decide between their cancer drugs and their house. Their struggle continues. They've been down here advocating with us. They spent their remaining time advocating so that other soldiers didn't have to face the indignities and the depravity and the desperation that they faced. And none of them will hear it. And none of them care. Except to tweet. Boy, they'll tweet it. Can't wait to see what they come up with on Veterans Day, on Memorial Day. Well, this is the reality of it. You're not allowed to just leave your post when the mission isn't completed. Apparently, you take an oath. You swear an oath, and you can't leave. But these folks can leave because they're on Senate time. Go ahead, go home, spend time with your families, because these people can't do it anymore. So they can't leave until this gets done. Because these people will not give up, they will not give in, and they will not relent. This is an embarrassment to the Senate, to the country, to the founders, and all that they profess to hold dear. And if this is America first, then America is
Jon Stewart on Capitol Hill yesterday after 25 Senate Republicans changed their votes to defeat a bill that would provide aid for military veterans exposed to toxins in war zones. Jon Stewart will be our guest next on Morning Joe.
Today, your case is our priority.
All through August, the primaries are heating up. This Tuesday, voters in 5 states head to the polls with all eyes on Arizona. Steve Kornacki will be breaking down the races.
It could really be transformative for American politics if the Hispanic vote really goes up.
Then on Wednesday, Joe, Mika, and Willie will discuss what the results could mean for November.
2022 is really going to be a referendum not on Joe Biden. It's going to be a referendum on the Republican Party.
Primary election coverage Tuesday night and Wednesday morning on MSNBC.
Couple of minutes before the top of the hour in Washington. Welcome back to Morning Joe. It is Friday, July 29th. More government text messages from around the time of the Capitol attack have disappeared. This time from 2 top leaders at Donald Trump's Department of Homeland Security. We will talk to the Washington Post reporter who broke that story. Plus, Jon Stewart is standing by. Will join us in just a moment to discuss the military veterans health care bill that was blocked by Senate Republicans and the likelihood, hopefully, that it gets through this week before they move on to the August recess. Jonathan Lemire, Mike Barnicle, Caddy K still with us, and we do begin with those text messages from the leaders of former President Trump's Homeland Security Department from around the time of the Capitol attack that now have been deleted. According to the Washington Post, the lost messages are from both acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf and acting Deputy Secretary Ken Cuccinelli. Joining us now, the reporter who broke the story, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter for the Washington Post, Carol Lettig. Carol, good morning to you. It seems like we've had you on every day this week with some other story you've broken. Let's talk about these text messages, when they come from, who they come from, and how they fit in with what we've seen from the Secret Service with their vanishing text messages around the time of January 6th.
Well, first off, thanks for having me on to talk about the story. A lot more readers learn about what we're breaking because of you guys. First, I'd just say that we were sort of shocked at the Washington Post to learn that Secret Service texts were missing for a critical period in America's history, a calamitous, chaotic incident, which is now under both multiple congressional committees investigations and a criminal investigation by the Department of Justice. But on top of that, in the course of our reporting, we learned that the Department of Homeland Security also had deleted all of the messages of the very top leaders of the Department of Homeland Security. Keep in mind that the Department of Homeland Security has the central responsibility for monitoring domestic extremist threat and protecting the homeland from that. On the day of January 6th and the days leading up to it, they were responsible for monitoring chatter on white supremacist platforms and platform about
All right, we're going to get, Carol, we're losing your shot just a little bit here on the Zoom. We're going to try to get that fixed. And Jonathan Lemire, as we do that, it's worth pointing out that Chad Wolf, who's at the center of this story, the former acting head of the Department of Homeland Security, resigned 5 days after the attack on the Capitol. So he resigned on January 11th. He was one who did not dispute the results of the election, said his department was preparing for the orderly and smooth transition to President-elect Biden's DHS team, not on board with the attempted coup, as Donald Trump hoped he would be. So these are figures whose text messages quite obviously need to be looked into as we figure out what happened in the days leading up to and during the attack.
Yeah, Wolf took a lot of criticism for implementing then-President Trump's immigration policy, the draconian child separation policy at the border. But really, to your point, he was not involved with some of this January 6th stuff and was one of the cabinet members to resign in the days afterwards. There were several who did that. But, of course, his text messages have come of great note. Now, Secret Service, of course, under the umbrella of the Department of Homeland Security these days, used to be over at Treasury. And since the shift, the number of scandals dogging that agency have only increased. And certainly aides, investigators really are eager, disappointed that those text messages are gone. And not just from any day, but, of course, from those specific days. And the words cover up are being bounced around the Beltway about this.
Sounds like we've got Carol Lettig back. Carol, is there a plausible explanation for why not just these texts, but also the Secret Service texts have disappeared so conveniently right around January 6th?
There is a plausible explanation, but it's not a very encouraging one about good governance. The Department of Homeland Security leadership told a government watchdog in February, we learned from looking at records that were obtained by another independent watchdog group that shared them with us. They notified them that they had basically reset the phones of the former acting Secretary of Homeland Security and also the acting Deputy Secretary, this is Chad Wolf and Ken Cuccinelli, prominent people, the most senior leaders of the Department of Homeland Security, that as they were on their way out the door, the phones were reset. If that sounds familiar to you, that's what the Secret Service told Congress as well. Sorry, these messages that are from some of the most important moments in this period that's under investigation, the attack on the Capitol, the walk up to that attack, the president's effort to overturn the results of the election. These texts are missing because we reset the phones. The problem with that explanation, as you guys know so well, is that there's a Federal Records Act that asks the government and every public servant to take extraordinary steps to make sure they archive, maintain, and back up government records. They're not only our history, they're an important part of making sure the next guy that's coming into office, the next president, has a full record of what's happened, a full record of what our government has represented, said, and done. And here we also have the extra, imperative of investigating what appear to be crimes.
As you say, it's not just a good idea to preserve those records. It is a federal law. We'll see if they turn up. The Washington Post, Carol Leonnig, thanks for bringing us your new reporting this morning. We appreciate it. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says the upper chamber will vote again next week on a bill to expand health care to veterans exposed to toxic chemicals from burn pits while serving overseas after Republicans blocked it yesterday. The Honoring Our Pact Act passed an initial vote 84-14 just last month. But 25 Senate Republicans changed their votes this week after the House made some changes to the bill. Here is how the chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, Montana Democrat Jon Tester, responded.
If you have the guts to send somebody to war, then you better have the guts to take care of them when they get back home. Or don't send them in the first place. The American people are sick and tired of the games that go on in this body. They're sick and tired of us working for Democrats or working for Republicans and not working for the American people.
America's heroes who fought in our wars, outside sweating their off, with oxygen, battling all kinds of ailments, while these sit in the air conditioning, walled off from any of it. They don't have to hear it. They don't have to see it. They haven't met a war they won't sign up for, and they haven't met a veteran they won't screw over. They're on Senate time. Do you understand? You live around here. Senate time is ridiculous. These live to 200. They're tortoises. They live forever. If this is America first, then America is
And Jon Stewart joins us now. He is, of course, a longtime veterans advocate. Also with us, Paul Rykoff. He's the host of the Independent Americans podcast, an Iraq War veteran, and the founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Guys, thanks both for being with us. Well, John, here you are again, having to be up on Capitol Hill, banging a podium to plead for basic health care for American heroes, whether it be around 9/11 or the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and beyond, by the way, in Vietnam, too. For people who are just sort of tuning into this issue because of the voice you lent it yesterday, what are we talking about exactly here?
First of all, I don't approve of that language that I was using, and I was shocked.
We had to beep it, John.
I don't approve of it. It's pretty simple, Willie. The PACT Act is a bill designed to give veterans the health care they need who've been exposed to burn pits and other toxins, leading all the way back to Agent Orange and their benefits had been denied because they hadn't been able to be service connected. So veterans were getting cancers and lung diseases and all kinds of other immunological responses and immune disorders, and it wasn't being covered in their health care and benefits, and they were dying, and their families were going bankrupt and struggling. And so this bill addresses those things. And by the way, has already passed. It passed on June 16th, 84-14 in the Senate. And there was a technical glitch in it that was blue slipped by the House. It was just one sentence about rural medical practices being utilized by the VA so that veterans who live far away from a big facility could also access that type of specialized care. That's the only thing that the House fixed. So that's where it stands. But if I could, Will, I want to address the talking point that the Republican senators, and I've started to see it bubble up, and it's just not true. They're suggesting that a budgetary gimmick was inserted into the bill at midnight by the dirty Dems that somehow is a Trojan horse to $400 billion of spending that has nothing to do with veterans. I'm assuming they will be spending it on pronoun commercials that they'll be running 24/7 on everybody's televisions to indoctrinate people. It's just not true. And that's really the crucial point of this. And I want to make sure that people are able to recognize that.
Well, yeah, John, to that point, Senator Toomey, we reached out to him again this morning and heard back. They directed us to the statement, which is exactly what you're talking about. I'll just read a quote. He says, Senator Toomey of Pennsylvania, it's wrong to use a veterans bill to hide a $400 billion unrelated slush fund. The Senate could have fixed this weeks ago, and we can still fix it now. We can very quickly amend the PACT Act to remove this budget gimmick without reducing spending on veterans in the underlying bill by a single penny. He says this isn't about not giving money to veterans. It's about making sure they get all the money that's in this bill.
Okay, this is nonsense. And, Ted Cruz said the same thing yesterday. This is a budgetary gimmick. A gimmick, or as it's also known, how they pay for the bill. But here's how you know they're lying. And God forgive me, I'm not going to say because their mouths are moving. All those Republicans that are saying, oh, this budgetary gimmick that was put in there, it's how the bill is paid for. And it was in the bill. This is how the bill was paid for. This is how it was paid for when it came out of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, unanimously, bipartisan, on June 16th, when Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley and all those other Republicans voted 84-14 to pass this bill. This is how it was paid for. This was not inserted by the House. This was not inserted by Democrats at the last minute. This is the provision of how the bill was paid for on June 16th when they passed it 84-14. So nothing changed. The only change that the House made was a constitutional issue. It was one sentence. And I don't want this to be one of those conversations where you go, well, let's just leave it here and, we'll check it out. I want you to fact check that while I'm sitting here. Did Ted Cruz and all those other Republicans who voted yes on this bill and then switched their vote to no, was that the provision of how the bill was paid for when they voted yes? Now, Toomey, on the other hand, he's been against this all along, so at least he's been a consistent dick. But this is nothing new. This is how it was paid for. The fix in the House was a tiny constitutional provision. This is the same bill that they passed. And by the way, all that nonsense that Toomey says about $400 billion of a slush fund that opens the door to that possibility. You know who can close that door? The Senate and the House, because they have the power of appropriation. So there is no $400 billion slush fund. And if he was against slush funds, maybe he wouldn't have voted for the $60 to $70 billion overseas operations contingency fund that they vote for every year, above and beyond the Defense Department spending. They always have money for the war with no guardrails and no oversight. But all of a sudden, they get religion on a health care bill for veterans. And I'll say this, the most despicable part of this whole thing is watching on the Senate floor, Ted Cruz fist bumping and then patting each other on the back when they blocked this bill. Josh Hawley and Pat Toomey celebrating their victory over veterans with cancer. Way to go, guys. You finally handed it to big veteran with cancer. Well done. They're lying about the provision that they're talking about. They're trying to make it sound dangerous. The whole place down there is a shell game of mandatory and discretionary spending. It's how they do everything. They move things into different buckets whenever it suits them, and they always move it around. This spending provision was in the bill when they passed it on June 16th. It wasn't a gimmick inserted by Democrats. It was the way the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee paid for the bill, and it came out of that committee unanimously. I have no idea why they flipped their vote. Rick Scott's on Twitter saying it's because of this gimmick. John Cornyn's on Twitter saying it's because they were supposed to get a vote on 2 amendments and they never got it. So I'll issue this challenge to Pat Toomey. Put your amendment on the floor of the Senate, give it a 60-vote threshold, just like you made the veterans have a 60-vote threshold on your cloture vote. And if you win it, great. You win it, and that's how it's done. But if you lose it, like you lost it on June 16th, pass this bill and let it done. And right now there's a vigil on the Capitol steps, Burn Pits 360, and Rosie Torres and Tim Jensen from Grunt Style are doing a watch. They are going to stay on the Capitol steps until this vote on Monday. All day, all night. If anybody's around there, bring them a juice box. Because I don't know if you know this, Washington, D.C. is a hellhole, and it's 180 degrees now.
Paul, you have been talking about burn pits for years. Every time over the last decade, at least, I'd reach out to you and say, hey, what are we missing on veterans? What should we be talking about? Burn pits, burn pits, burn pits. So for people, again, who haven't been familiar with this issue the way you've been leading on it, what exactly is the problem? Where did this start? And what are some of the impacts, the deadly impacts that our veterans are feeling from it?
Well, here we go again, Willie. I think I came on your show to first talk about this maybe 18 years ago. It's pretty straightforward. In the military, when we deployed, they take all kinds of waste, everything from military waste to medical waste to plastic. They put it in a giant hole and they burn it. They set it on fire, like the image you see on your screen. And we, millions of us, sat around and breathed that crap in for over a decade. I was around burn pits in Kuwait. I was around them in Iraq. And now we're getting sick. Many of our friends have already died. Many of our friends are dying right now. And I think Jon is thankfully jumping in yet again. But we've been here before. We had to go through the same crap for the Zadroga bill after 9/11. I'm also a 9/11 first responder and was exposed down there. If we didn't have Jon blow that up, it wouldn't have passed. Then we had the extension. Jon had to come in again and blow it up, so it passed. And here we are again. And we were also here in 2014 when we had the Clay Hunt SAVE Act for veterans facing suicide. And there was one lone senator who played the same kind of nonsense games, Tom Coburn. He held it up single-handedly. So it's the same playbook. And now it's Senator Pat Toomey, who's a coward. He is not a champion for fiscal responsibility. He's a jackass. He's a power-hungry dude in a suit who's trying to play games with our lives. So our friends are dying, and he's sitting in the air conditioning in a suit playing nonsense political games, and it has to stop. He has to be shamed into oblivion. So I don't have to come on again with Jon Stewart in a couple of years for another veterans bill to name one U.S. senator who is single-handedly stopping maybe the most common-sense legislation in Washington.
Hey, Jon, it's Jonathan Lemire. Can you give us a sense as to how many veterans right now are impacted by illnesses, by cancers, by other diseases or disorders that they picked up because of these burn pits? So therefore, how many people right now are not getting the medical care they perhaps need because of this Republican inaction?
Well, there's tens of thousands. I mean, look, there's, as Paul will tell you, the 3.5 million veterans that were in theater in Iraq and Afghanistan were all exposed to these toxic chemicals. But this bill also deals with Agent Orange issues that haven't been cleaned up for the Vietnam War. Look, every bill that's going on here stands on the shoulders of the work that the Vietnam veterans did to try and get their illnesses from Agent Orange recognized. Every war that we fight, there are no limits on what we will spend to prosecute that war. There are no limits on what we will spend on the weapon systems and on the toys. And in every war, when the veterans come back and they have to face the consequences of that fight, suddenly Congress is looking through their pants and their couches and they can't find the change. So this has been going on since this all, since we began prosecuting these wars. So there are millions of veterans who will be affected. Everybody's immune system is different, but a toxic wound is an IED that goes off in your body 5 years, 7 years, 10 years later. They've made great advances on traumatic brain injury, on post-traumatic stress, obviously on corrective surgeries for amputees and adaptive rehabilitation. Toxic exposure is the one area that has been ignored. This bill finally addresses all that. And again, I beg of you, please check and announce on your show that the funding provision, that is the way this bill is paid for, is exactly as it was when the Senate passed it 84-14 on June 16th, because they're lying that this is a gimmick that's been thrown in there. It's a talking point, and it has to be knocked down.
Paul Rieckhoff, this is nothing new. I mean, this is just the latest example of something going on in Washington, D.C. that covers a lot of the definitions of hypocrisy, incompetence, cruelty. This bill, the PACT bill, was first introduced in June of 2021. That's more than a year ago. A lot of veterans have died since then. A lot more are closer to death since then. You know better than anyone here on this particular segment that the United States government, for years, if they're going to send someone to Da Nang, to Panama, to Iraq, they do it in a quick second. You go. You saddle up and go. And now when they're asked, please, just help this person. Think of it just as an individual person suffering from brain cancer, lung cancer, other forms of cancer. Well, we have to check the budget. But in this case, this is pure political hypocrisy. So my question to you is, I'm not going to ask you the obvious question, do you ever get tired of dealing with this? My question to you is, how do we go about singling out even more so the individuals like Josh Hawley, like Ted Cruz, who go and stand up in their home states at rallies and say, we have to support our veterans, and do this as if they're invisible?
You know, Mike, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. And I've been coming on this show for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
Call up Raikoff. Here he comes to tell you about some outrageous crap in Washington that's screwing over veterans and our military. It has to change by singularly identifying the ringleaders, because there are people who politically quarterback this. I talked about Tom Coburn in the past. Rand Paul did it in the past on 9/11 for first responders. Now it's Senator Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania, who's leaving the Senate at the end of this year. He does not give a damn. So you have to shame him into oblivion. We have to make sure that everybody in America makes him famous. Everybody should know his name. So when he leaves the Senate, he can't go into some cushy corporate job and make a ton of money, or go to some lobbying shop in Washington and come back in a year and start pushing for some special interests, because our friends are dying. You asked how many people will be affected. 1 in 5 living veterans could receive care from this bill. 1 in 5. That goes all the way back to Vietnam vets. Like, we got Jon Stewart doing interviews from the Jersey Turnpike. We got our friends on Capitol Hill sleeping overnight. This is what we have to do to get health care for Vietnam veterans from 40 years ago. This isn't just 2021. This is Vietnam veterans, many of whom are already dead. So this is about the soul of America. This is about whether government can work, and this is about whether Americans really are willing to step up. Go to Pat Toomey's office. Call him right now. Send juice boxes to the people on the Hill. Get this through immediately, because they may not get it through before they all go on summer break. And then let's get to the next issues that we've got to get to, because there's a whole line behind them that are ready to come as well.
Jon Stewart, yes, doing interviews from the Vince Lombardi service area on the Turnpike, I believe it was, on his way home. John,
I'm not ashamed to say I have a bladder. I have to pull over every now and again.
They got a good Roy Rogers there, too, as I recall. John, before we let you go, let me ask you about the future of this. We've heard Chuck Schumer saying on Monday, this coming Monday, a couple of days from now, he's going to bring it up for a vote, and he believes it'll pass. Republicans saying, once we clear this up, yeah, we're going to pass it. We're going to get the money to go where it needs to go.
I want to go back
frankly, it's because the noise you made. So is it going to happen?
Well, again, Willie, like, when you say we want to clear this up, what do they mean? Do they mean clear up the way that the bill is paid for that was in the bill on June 16th when they voted yes? Like, what do they mean by clean up? This is not a gimmick. It's the provision by which they pay for the bill. It doesn't open up $400 billion of mysterious spending that Democrats can do whatever they want with. The VA secretary has to, even on a mandatory spending bill, submit how that money is spent to the Senate and the House, and the appropriators in the Senate and the House can still turn it down if they want. That is their prerogative. They're the Congress. So to pretend that there is some open door of $400 billion slush fund that can be spent on whatever anybody wants to spend it on is nonsense. And this is exactly how the bill was designed. It came out of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee unanimously with this provision in it, and they passed it. 84-14. And now all of a sudden they're saying, what the hell is this? What was Ted Cruz? Oh, I'm just a poor Harvard lawyer. They've snuck this in on me. I don't know what happened. It's how the bill was paid for. Please tell your viewers that is the truth. Do not let them obfuscate.
The bill, as it went to the House, goes through the Senate 84-14, goes to the House, passes there, returns to the Senate. The changes to the bill in the House were described as minor, so not major funding.
It was about rural VA access. Right. That's all it was, and it was a slight constitutional question that had to be fixed. The Senate tried to fix it by a UC on June 16th, right after they passed it, and Toomey shot it down. He would not let them do a unanimous consent to fix that one sentence. So let's just be clear about the dynamics of what happened here and how this thing has been pulled. And we cannot allow them to pull the wool over on this for all these veterans that need this health care and these benefits. It's outrageous.
That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. It's not about politics. It's about getting health care to people who stepped up when our country was attacked. Jon Stewart, the host of The Problem with Jon Stewart on Apple TV+, and Paul Rykoff, Iraq War veteran who's been sounding the alarm about these burn pits for well over a decade. Guys, thanks both for your advocacy and thanks for being here this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, guys.
Mm-hmm.